This is for state team leaders to get information about the capacity building virtual institute coming up in just about a month.
And thanks everybody for putting your name and state and who you are in the chat. That's really appreciated.
All right, Bridget, you're up.
All right, shall we get going? Yeah, well, we want to be respectful of your time, so we will get going. And if other people join us as we go, they'll have access to the presentation. So welcome everybody to Team Leaders Training. I'm sure that some of you have been here previously, and we are really glad to have you back. Today we have several of us presenting, so we'll be going back and forth, but we kind of want to make this as informal as possible. So keeping it chatty. If you've got questions along the way, pop them in the chat, and we'll try to put in any links that we're going to talk about along the way too, so that you have information that you can refer to. But here today we have Jackie Hyatt, Michael Storr, Jennifer Coyle, and myself, Bridget Griffin, to give you some information about the Institute. So let's move on and talk about who we are and just kind of give you the lowdown on the NTACT-C. The collaborative is the Technical Assistance Center co-funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education, that's OSEP, and the Rehabilitation Services Administration, that's RSA. So it's jointly funded. It's running, it's been up and going for more than a year now, and it's running through September 2025 on this grant. It's a multi-site, staff comes from multiple places. So that those include the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, where we usually have the Institute. Again, it's virtual this year, but hopefully at some point in the future, we'll all be back in Charlotte again. East Tennessee State University, the George Washington University, which is where I am out of, Portland State University, the University of Kansas, the University of Maryland, and the University of Oregon. So that can tell you that we really have to think about collaboration at the top end, just the same way that you guys have to think about it in the States. We can move on to the next slide, Jen. So the purpose of the Institute is really to build capacity for state education and vocational rehabilitation agencies to use data-driven decision-making, to collaborate with one another, to provide good outcomes for students, to provide quality professional development, and to institute systems to support local education agencies, VR, stakeholders, to implement evidence-based practice and compliant transition-focused practices. So we provide a lot of information, tools, and support to assist all of those stakeholders in delivering effective services and instruction for secondary students and out-of-school youth with disabilities. This is really what we're planning to do during the Institute, and support you throughout the Institute to work on your goals related to these areas. And I guess you would say through the Institute and beyond, so throughout the year as well. So all students with disabilities, the goal is that they'll be prepared to graduate from high school with the knowledge, skills, and supports for post-secondary education, for training, employment, and community engagement. We really want to focus on things that really improve the lives of these students. So things that can really help there are enrollment in post-secondary education, gaining credentials, because we know that anytime a person gains a credential, that they're more likely to succeed better in employment as they move forward. in that competitive, integrated employment environment and in engagement with their whole community. So thinking about all the things that bring success for our lives, I guess, is what we want for our students' lives as well. So today's agenda, really the things that we want you to walk away with today are with the ability to prepare your team for the 2022 Capacity Building Virtual Institute, to think about the data that you want to gather to use in your team meetings. We want you to walk away with saying, okay, as a team leader, here are some of the things that I need to do to prepare for the Institute, to prepare my team and to bring everyone together to do this, and then to answer any questions that you have about the Institute as well. So now I'll hand it over to Jackie.
Okay, thanks, Bridget. So just taking a look at the purpose of the CBVI, Bridget shared a little bit of it, but it's really that time to increase your knowledge of effective transition-focused practices. So during our sessions that are provided for you, as well as the other opportunities to network and engage with your team as well, really wanting to give you new information, additional information. And then taking a look at that relevant transition data that reflects the current practices. So in the sessions too, you'll be hearing about other sources of data you may not have considered, or also just really looking at your state data too. And then updating or developing your interagency state plans. So it's a time for you to reflect on what you've done this last year, pull out and continue to look, because we know you've been doing that throughout the whole year, looking at those plans and where you're at, but to engage in that conversation again and incorporate knowledge you're learning during the sessions as well too, and develop new partnerships across states. So really, you're going to be meeting and listening to several states present, as well as other kind of experts or people that know different aspects of the field, and be willing to reach out, and we'll share information about how you can connect. That's really how we start to develop those cross-state partnerships too, and have fun. So I'm excited about this new platform that we're using this year. It looks like it's going to be a lot more interactive, and I hope that you see that as well and try that out. We'll just see a little glimpse of it today, but you'll be learning more about that in future information that we share. So the capacity building model, and this is something that we share with you each year about the importance of the process that we use, but you'll notice there's a big yellow under renovation ribbon across the middle of that, and nothing to be nervous about. We're not blowing up the system. But what we wanted to share with you is that as we've come together and as INTAC-C, we're realizing that there's some little tweaks and some ways that we can provide some of that capacity building for you throughout the year, as well as maybe in some different ways during the institutes too. So we wanted to share with you on the next slide just a little bit about how we see that. So the Institute is one piece of that capacity building model that we use. It's an important part, but we know that capacity building is ongoing. And as you've seen this year, we've really tried to develop networks and other opportunities for you to come together, to share information and to ask questions of each other, and to really focus on those goals and potential activities or ways that you can support your state moving forward, so that we are really looking at that strategic planning going throughout the year, that you're evaluating, that you're meeting with your teams, and we want to be able to provide that technical assistance and support for that concept. So as we go throughout the next year or 2 years, you'll be seeing some ways that we will make some adjustments, and we want to hear from you too. We'll be asking you to reflect on that and share with us some of the needs you have as well. Next slide. So looking at that, moving back into the CBI format, so really looking at the conference itself, and we talk about this often, it's really that hybrid, it's an institute and it's a conference. So you go back and forth, you have the elements of the conference with the sessions as well as the institute with the planning times with your teams. So it's really meant to be a combined format for you to be able to learn, but then also applying the learning as you're having conversations in your planning sessions and working with your team members as well to provide that state context. So with the virtual format, now, what is this, third year we've done virtual? And I have to say, we've learned a lot. It's been beneficial in so many ways. But as Bridget mentioned, we'll be looking at hopefully in person at some point and maybe trying to figure out how we do that. But with that virtual format, we have both the asynchronous and synchronous presentations. So there's some pre-recorded sessions, some different snippets that we'll be sharing with you, as well as the times that you can be together with folks to interact a little bit more. You've got the dedicated team planning, and that you will use your own platform for. So however your team does planning throughout the year or meetings, that's you use your own platform for that as well. And then, but we will have a landing page that will, for the CBVI, that will be a one-stop place that you can go to find out information and to look for content and any of the support resources that you need. So Jennifer?
Hi, everyone. So what I'm going to do real briefly is just talk about the Institute components, and then I'm going to dive a little bit more into the content sessions. So 5 of the main components for our Institute are the content sessions, those team planning times, which are facilitated or not, depending on how you choose as a team, planning strategically with your team, and then we have content experts and networking. And both of those, as you'll see, we'll share with you in a little bit, are different, but different in a cool way because of the new platform that we're using this year. So I'm going to just give you some information about the content sessions, and then we'll kind of go through each day of the Institute and get an idea of how those are put together. Michael Storr is doing some great work with our Youth Engagement Transition Initiative, or the YETI, and they're putting together a pretty cool opening session for the Institute between YETI and our representatives from OSERS. That will be exciting. We have a couple of whole group keynote sessions that we're using to, each day. We have 4 rounds of concurrent sessions, and within each round we have 3 different content sessions that your teams can go to. You know, as always, we recommend that you divide your team members up among those different sessions. You have more information to bring back to your team planning time. We have a couple of workshops, and then we also have these early bird options and then opportunities to extend your learning that happen after the Institute. So the primary pieces of the Institute are from 12 to 4 o'clock Eastern time, and then we have early birds at 11 and post-Institute learning options from 4 to 4:45 throughout the Institute. So on Tuesday, which is the very first day of the Institute, this is just a quick glance of our agenda for that day. So we have an early bird session on Tuesday, and that actually ends up being, that's going to be like our peer networks and community of practice groups. We'll be able to come together and learn more about those during that early bird session. And again, those are optional, but that's a way to get a little more information about different pieces. Then we have the whole group. We have some workshops. We have 3 different workshops from 1 to 2 that are open to anyone to attend. We have our first team planning meeting that day. And again, if you're working with a facilitator or having your, bringing your team together, that will be on your own platform, but we'll give you more information about that as we go. And then we have extended learning options on Tuesday as well. And what those look like are extended option or opportunities from the content that was presented earlier in that day. And those are kind of like a network lounge where you can come in and you can ask questions via chat, and people from those presentations will be there to offer more information. We'll also have NTAC staff there to help with those conversations and chats. So that's an option, another way just to get more information from presenters from that day. On Wednesday, it looks very similar. We have 2 rounds of content sessions that day. So 6 different pieces of content for teams to attend. We also have a nice whole group session at the beginning. So some of the content sessions that I'm just gonna go ahead to Thursday, but some of the content sessions are around diversity, equity, and inclusion, pre-employment training services, anything. We have some sessions around career and technical education, working with students who have complex support needs, work-based learning opportunities. So we have a good variety. We have some family engagement pieces. So a good variety of sessions, as we know from all of you that you're interested in getting more information about. On Thursday, it's a little bit different. We have that early bird again in the morning. We start with another round of sessions. We have the team planning, another round, and then we're gonna wrap everything up in the afternoon with our Yeti group again. They opened the Institute and they'll be closing the Institute again. And then there's also an option for team planning if people choose to do that then. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Bridget.
All right, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the facilitated team planning meetings. And just a note, thanks Jen for telling us about the agenda. And I did put a link to the agenda in the chat if you guys want to go to the NTAC website and kind of have a visual of that agenda as well. But I'm going to talk a little bit about facilitated team planning now. That is your dedicated planning time with the facilitator. Using the online strategic planning tool or another planning document. So you all have access to the online strategic planning tool, and we will walk through that just a little bit later here. But you can also choose to use your own planning document as well, and some teams certainly do that, though lots of teams do use the online strategic planning tool. During that time, you will also have content session debriefs. Many teams choose to send different team members to different content sessions throughout the Institute and then come back and talk about them a little bit and what they learned and share that knowledge. And I always found that to be helpful when I was on a team because it meant that you kind of spread the learning across many people and were able to come back and hear about that. Next slide, please, Jen. So the facilitated team planning meetings, really the purpose is to bring your team together to set goals and to establish activities that relate to your priority areas and improve the outcomes ultimately for students. But in those team meetings, your state interagency team can assess their current needs and priorities. So kind of really taking a little bit of time to sit back, and you'll probably do that ahead of the Institute as well, kind of thinking about, okay, what are my priorities for this coming year? Are there things that I need to carry forward? Are there new priorities that we want to tackle? But just kind of thinking about that. That may be kind of assessing your current strategic plan, looking at what you've done in the past, where you need to go from there, or developing a new plan. And again, like we said, sharing out that information from the content sessions. So facilitators are available for any teams who choose, and you can request that facilitator right when you register. Some teams, I guess, do choose not to have a facilitator. It's always been something that I think has been helpful for teams that I have worked with. It's that person who will kind of keep you on track as you go through and kind of keep you moving along. But we will match you and your team to a facilitator, and that facilitator will reach out to you prior to the CBVI. You can even set up a meeting with that facilitator prior to CBVI so that you kind of get a rhythm and kind of set the stage a little bit for your meetings. And then you'll have that scheduled team planning time that Jen mentioned during CBVI. That scheduled team planning time occurs on your own virtual platform. Those times are kind of there on that slide. Tuesday, May 3rd from 2:15 to 4, Wednesday, May 4th, 1:45 to 3, and Thursday, May 5th, 1 to 2 p.m. So once you have your team brought together, you will be scheduling those meetings either on your own Zoom platform or on Teams or whatever platform that you use, and make sure that you also invite your facilitator to your meetings once you have those set up. I know that some teams are probably planning to get together, and maybe it's just the facilitator that will be Zooming into those meetings. So however you decide to do that, that's just fine, just to ensure that you do set up those meetings. All right. Of course, you know, for those team meetings, you're inviting various stakeholders from your own state. Here are some recommendations, I guess you would say, to ensure engagement of those stakeholders. It's great if you can have some co-leads from education and VR, just showing that collaboration and commitment to collaboration from the top, I think, is really helpful. Choose your team members based on your current goals and your projected goals and the data that you have to bring to bear, because really, you want those team members who are really invested in the particular goal that you are working with at this time. So that team membership can change a little bit from year to year, and just ensure that you bring in those new people that you need. So who are the new key stakeholders that maybe you should be bringing to the table? And if one person needs to step back for a particular year or whatever that might be, just having those conversations. It is very highly encouraged to engage a youth or a young adult on your team, and also a family member. So Michael is going to talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. So I'm not going to dwell on that too much, but we really want to encourage that youth voice at the table. Have a discussion ahead of time with all your new team members, really to let them know what's the purpose, get them engaged, answer those questions, and help them to feel comfortable with the process, and kind of walk them through what this process looks like, because that's really helpful. Once you come to those team meetings, then if you have already prepped your team members, they're going to be more ready to engage. And make sure that you continuously touch base with them so that they feel engaged, they understand what their role is and what how the process goes, so that you're really hearing their voice. Okay. This is really just some pointers, again, kind of to follow on from the last slide. So you want all of your team members, especially those youth and family members, to really feel like they're a valued part of that team. So you want to listen to them, give them time to air their voice, let them give some input into the process, make sure that they feel that they're a part of the conversation and are actively involved in the process. So we all know we don't want to sit around a table and not ever have anybody turn to us and ask for our opinions and things like that. We really want to be part of that process. Their involvement should be purposeful. And that kind of goes back to selecting your team members again. They need to have some skin in the game, a stake in what's being talked about. You want to be sure that everybody feels respected at that table, that they're not being judged, and that they're free to give their opinions, and they're asked for those opinions and that input. So really, team leads can assist the facilitator to ensure that everybody around the table is heard. I would say it's always a good idea to kind of set your ground rules from the start. about respect, about contributions, that sort of thing. So just some reminders there. And now I will hand it over to Michael to talk a little more about the youth voice.
Great, thanks so much, Bridget. And as Jennifer and Bridget had mentioned, we really are putting a major focus this year at the Capacity Building Virtual Institute to have state teams engage students, youth, or young adults. Last month, on March 17th, the YETI, the Youth Transition Engagement Initiative, put together a webinar kind of highlighting the importance of youth engagement in planning, in really looking not only with state teams, but also what's happening in your states and even locally, how youth, students, youth, and young adults can be more engaged. There is a link on today's PowerPoint that will take you to the recorded session for March 17th. And along with that session, really were tips and pointers on how to best prepare and engage a young person in that process. And I think in the past, there were a couple states that involved young folks in their planning, but would really like, if you can, take a step back and look at your state team makeup and what your goals are for the coming year. And is there a place to have that youth engagement, participation, and youth voice? I think the important point here, there needs to be a reason. Bridget was kind of hitting upon that in the planning, but if there is, it would be great, because I think what we're trying to get at here is really hearing from the young folks that we're trying to support with secondary transition and having their input, their voice, their knowledge in what's happening. I hate to admit it, but I'm getting a little long in the tooth. And when I work with the YETI and I go back, it's like there are things that I'm really not like, wow, that's your thought, or that's been your experiences. And I think sometimes we're not aware of really where are those young folks that we're trying to support in our secondary transition process in our states. So think about your state team. Think about inviting a student, youth, young adult member to attend. And if you could send me an email by April 21st with that contact information, I'd appreciate that. We are having, the YETI is doing a webinar on April 26th in the evening for those students, youth, young adults. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern time to allow for schedules. And during that session, really what the YETI staff are going to do, those young folks, are to talk to the youth that will be participating with your state team on how best to participate and prepare. I did want to note too that we're really looking at that student, youth, young adult being involved in your state team planning times. So if they can't attend the whole institute, when Jen was going over those specific times, each day there's that state team time, it would be great for that young person to engage. And I think even if they're only able to be there for part of the time, the fact that you're reaching out and engaging and having that active participation would be great. So again, just as a reminder, think about that and then send me the name of that student, youth, or young adult who would be participating on your team so that we can do outreach through YETI. On the next slide, just wanted to highlight again where the Youth Engagement Transition Initiative folks will be. As Jen had mentioned, they will be part of the opening keynote. They'll be engaging with the head of OSEP and RSA, presenting a welcoming, and then actually kind of doing a brief overview and providing pointers and tips for engagement and goal planning. And then on Thursday, again, as Jen had mentioned, they're going to wrap up the Capacity Building Virtual Institute this year. And the hope is that they'll engage with the students, youth, and young adults from your state teams in presenting information and actually doing a follow-up and, okay, we did this great planning, we're all psyched, but what comes next? So that's really the plan, the game plan for involvement. But again, we would really hope that you do outreach and let us know who that student or youth, young adult may be on your team. With that, I'm going to turn this back over to Jackie.
Thanks, Michael. I think that's so exciting that you've worked so hard with the youth and to really bring them into the mix so that their voice is heard. I know that when I've worked with teams within states and across, that youth voice really does make a difference. So really thank you for working with those folks, with the youth and bringing them in. So I just want to just take a second and take a look at strategic planning process. So Bridget shared with you kind of the ins and outs of pulling the team together and really bringing folks to the table and how that might look. But this is really just what are those key components of that planning process. So when you're together, really establishing those roles and responsibilities. So it's really the mechanics of a team planning time, like who's going to be the recorder? Do you have anybody on your team planning ahead of time for any accessibility, and letting us know too if we need to support you in any of that would be really helpful. But just, you know, who's kind of the timekeeper as well too, because we know we can get into things and not move our process along as we had hoped. And then we really believe that using a planning document or tool is really important. So you have a place to record and you have a place to reflect back. So whether you're using paper, a paper version, or you're using the online planning tool, that's really important. And we have a couple examples I'll show you in the next couple of slides. We'll talk a little bit more about the planning tool and document issue. And then just as that helps with that assessing your progress toward your established goals. So looking, like was mentioned, at where you were last year, where you are now, updating that, looking at, do we need different goals? Maybe that goal wasn't exactly what you needed last year and you've met it. And so just really establishing that process of reviewing that and having those conversations across your team. And then identifying those measures, the evaluation measures. That's one thing I think that is really important. And I don't know, as a team member, I always realize that. But having those so you can reflect and you know that you're gathering information is really, really important. So next slide, and we'll look at the strategic planning tool. So many of you have used Intaxi's strategic planning tool and may have used it in the past and haven't been using it the last couple of years, but the online planning tool is based on the Taxonomy Transition Programming 2.0. And so that's the basis for the assessment that a team goes through and the planning, developing the goals to address those needs. So you'll see that in there. It's really focused and built around evidence-based practices. So what you'll see in there through the assessment process, some of the questions and the data elements are all based on that. And it helps to provide that roadmap. So one of the things that I learned as I used the tool more was that at the end, so maybe when you're going through that assessment process and you're in the middle of the tool, you don't really know where you're going to be when you get to the end with your goals. But if you can print out a PDF of the action plan, and it looks just like a typical action plan with your goals, your activities, your timelines, responsibilities. So that does really offer that to you. So the planning tool can do that along with any of the paper versions that you may be using, or an in-state tool. Maybe you have a state planning tool. Next slide. So this is screenshots of what the planning tool looks like right now. And as you go in there, you'll see, if you go in the current version, you probably, sometimes when you get to that landing page, you're kind of like, which one do I choose? Or is this really about transition? So what we've been doing the last several months is we've been looking at how we can kind of modernize or update the strategic planning tool so it really reflects where we are right now and our practices. So you'll see by the time the Institute is our hope that landing page will look a little different, and we picked some pictures and some language that reflects actually the population that we're working with in transition. One thing that you'll notice when you go into the planning tool is that the team, when you identify your team members, you'll have more options and you can drill down a little bit. They'll be able to identify more specifically in the tool who they're representing and what their role is. So we took some input from all of you who use that planning tool and really started to expand it so that you could know who was on your team as you're working, but also it would help inform us as well too. So that you'll see right away is a little shift. Other place that you'll notice some changes are in the data, suggested data elements within the different areas of the taxonomy. We updated that, included more of a cross-section of suggested data tools that reflects better the agencies and the cross-agency work that we're doing now. So you'll see within the tool, maybe just some changes. They may not even be that noticeable to you, so the first thing you're going to notice, hopefully, when you go in during the Institute is that visually it's going to look a little bit more updated and reflect a little bit more of what you're doing. Okay. Then just wanted to share with you and reiterate that if you don't have a planning document that you're currently using, we have some available and your facilitators have access to those. But we've got a couple of different versions. We know that as your team plans, you may, while you're identifying goals, you may be also identifying objectives. So there's one that reflects that a little bit more. So there's some different options. And also we know that some of the states, some of you have tools that you use within your state that you want to continue using, and that's fine too. We just want to be able to support you and recognize that there's different ways, but knowing that the planning, having a tool of some sort is really important for that continued documentation and interaction within your team. Okay, next slide.
Okay, I am going to just go through the last two components of the Institute, which is content experts and networking. Historically, with content experts, we have had particularly when we've been face-to-face. Some of you may remember the multicolored sheets, and you would sign up for the content expert and they would come to your team meeting and talk for 20 minutes about a topic that you selected as a team. In the virtual environment, that is a little bit more difficult to do. However, we do have that networking lounge in our new platform where we will have content experts, and primarily those are individuals that have already done a presentation or will be providing information that you as a team might want more clarity around or some more details. And those content experts or people who have been presenting will be available in the networking lounge on Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons from 4 to 4:45 Eastern time. The facilitator, or even team leads, if you're not using a facilitator, we always encourage you to generate 1 or 2 questions that you could ask that content expert. So in the networking lounge this year, it is will all be done through chat. So you can type in your question, and that content expert will respond to you. Also, if you are looking to engage kind of on a deeper level with a content expert, you can reach out to anyone on the planning team and we can help connect you to that person after the Institute is over. The final piece to the Institute, and we always hear, this is one of the things that is very consistent on our evaluations every year, that states just want opportunities to engage with other people, to do networking, to engage with career-like individuals, those different pieces. So within the new virtual platform, Vsphere, we keep talking about it, but we're gonna, on the next slide, I have a couple of pictures to show you. There's lots of opportunities to network with other individuals. We're gonna have some exhibit booths where you can go and learn more about different resources or different organizations. We have that networking lounge again. And then as we have the last 2 years, being in a virtual environment, we've had a summer celebration. So we're planning on doing that again this year, where you can join everyone in Zoom and hear about what everyone's working on and ask questions too. So real quickly, with the Vsphere platform we have coming up, it's going to be, so when you all registered, and maybe you've already gone to our landing page, you can see that it has a little bit of a different feel this year than what we used last year. And so when we get closer, we'll be giving you more information about how to actually get into the platform. But once you enter the platform, you'll be able to just kind of click on different pieces. You'll be able to go into the big ballroom, if you will, for the whole group session. You'll be able to find where your content sessions are going to be, where the networking lounge is. We're always going to have someone in the information booth. So you can go there to get more information about different pieces. There's really good tech support. So if you're having a challenge getting into a content session, you'll be able to access different supports for that. But you can kind of get an idea of how it's set up. It looks really dynamic, and it's kind of fun, and it's a different way to engage with people as well at the Institute. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Bridget.
All right, thanks, Jen. It sounds really fun. I can't wait to engage with this platform because everything I've heard is so good about it. So I can't wait to kind of hop on that and engage in all these different booths and everything else. It sounds really fun. We're going to talk just a little bit more now about setting the stage, even though that's what we've been talking about the whole session really. But some of the things to keep in mind, and I'm going to talk quite a bit on the next few slides about data and your access to data. But that really is kind of reflecting on knowing where you are now. What have you accomplished in the past year? Looking back over your previous plans and kind of assessing, okay, we're here, this is where we wanted to be, or we accomplished that. But that will really try to help set the stage for going forward, kind of looking at just that position. Having access to various types of data, and we'll talk about the different types of data that you might want to consider gathering ahead of the Institute so that you can really make some good planning decisions. And that's not just education data, but also that data from VR and maybe even other sources that you can bring to bear. Having a well-prepared team, and really a well-prepared team will also be able to understand a little bit about that data. Not everybody is in the day-to-day work or able to have a look at that data all the time, especially when we think about youth or family members coming to the team. But really preparing them and having them well-informed will have you ready to hit the ground running, really, so to speak. So let's go to the next slide, Jen. So let's look at, or before you come, you should take a look at what did you complete and what do you want to carry forward? I sat in a session yesterday with another group of people, and somebody kind of brought out 3 pointers in relation to this particular thing. Thinking about what is it we need to do that we're not doing? So think about, yeah, what are those things that we need to do that we're not doing? What are we doing right now that we need to amplify or do more of? And then what are we doing that's not getting us where we want to go? And how do we stop doing those activities and behaviors? Because that's also a hard thing to do too, to change your mode of operation and do something differently. So really that's kind of what all these questions on this slide are getting on. What's facilitated our progress? What are the specific barriers that we've run into? And what data do we need to help us plan? So let's take a deeper look into that data. So some of the data that you can consider would be your indicator and program performance data. You want to think about disaggregating that data by race and gender and by disability, socioeconomic status, even the different geographic areas in your states, the graduation pathways for students and how they differ. So just kind of really taking a deep dive into that data. That's where you can identify some of the gaps. And that's really where you might be making your plans, is to address those gaps. Transition performance information. You can look to your VR agency to bring forward their pre-employment transition referral and participation data. Student achievement data, that's also an important factor here. And then program evaluation results. So teacher workshops, student employment data from work-based programs, student performance and skill in life skills curriculum, so looking at that program evaluation data, even for specific programs that you have put on, sometimes that will tell you, oh my gosh, this was really worthwhile for people. We need to do more of this. On the next slide, we're really looking at some of those specific data pieces that you can look at. And I'm not going to read through all of these specific pieces, but from your state performance plan or annual performance reports on the education side, you can pull out a lot of specific meaningful data there. Also from the state VR side, you can look at all sorts of things from the pre-employment transition service data dashboards for the state, looking at how students have even engaged in pre-employment transition services. Are they potentially eligible? Are they applying for the VR program? Will those supports be there for them in the future? So thinking about those type of things is also very helpful. When you've looked at the data, think about, okay, what other things should I be considering here? What are the subpopulations? What are the special populations that I should be considering? Well, we mentioned that on the previous slide, but always thinking about, okay, what more can I bring to the table? The next slide kind of addresses that a little bit. Okay, it brings in other partners and stakeholders that you probably are already engaging in your team, but your partners like CTE, how many students with disabilities are participating in CTE programs? How does that vary across the state? If it's going really well in one part of the state, what are they doing in order to make that go well? Because another part of the state might benefit from learning those same lessons. How many PTI contacts are happening regarding transition? So you'll often have a member of your parent training institute who's part of your team, and they're able to give you a lot of information. I remember when I was part of a team, that was really told me a lot about consumer satisfaction, or actually more usually about dissatisfaction, but how can I tap into that? And where is that dissatisfaction coming from? What type of complaints are people having? PTI doesn't get a lot of calls about saying transition's going really well or anything else is going really well, because that's when people tend to reach out when they have a complaint. So, but just knowing and being on top of that and understanding what that's about will help you understand the concerns of parents and students. How many students have a 504 plan? Because that's an important piece of information as well. We talk a lot and we get a lot of special education data, but let's also think about those students with disabilities who have a 504 plan in place. And then numbers of students who are engaged in juvenile justice systems or in foster care or any other special populations as well. So just kind of looking outside the box. Another piece of data that you can kind of sometimes access in your state would be consumer satisfaction data. Lots of VR agencies do consumer satisfaction data, schools do consumer satisfaction data. So just really hearing about what's happening and some of that anecdotal data, good stories about what's happening in your state, they can inform things as well, because they can really point to good practices. So just being able to look at all of that information. So, all right, Jackie, I'm going to hand it back to you again.
Okay. So the next little bit is just kind of recapping and pulling information together to around preparing your team. So remember, we talked a lot about building your team, confirming who your co-leads are, confirming who's going to be a part of your team, or if they're just going to be able to be there during part of the time, meeting with them ahead of time, doing those things you typically do before as well as during to build that group. Acclimate, let them know what's going on, give them the links to registration and any of the other information that we share with you, because lots of times we'll be sending things out specifically to team leads to help disseminate that to your team members. But this year we've got a little bit better handle, I think, on the registration piece. So have more direct contact with who's registering, and we'll be able to share additional information. But if you can facilitate that, making sure everybody's got what they need, that's really helpful. And then identifying those team member roles. So making sure people know what their role is when they're coming to the Institute, as well as the team planning times. Who's the facilitator? Who's the recorder, note taker, whatever, timekeeper, those different roles that you have within your team. So build, acclimate, and identify are 3 big buckets that we ask you to help with and support your team. So we've put together the next slide that has kind of that more checklisty kind of thing that we like to have. We can check off things. So test your login. If you're using the online planning tool, test that login to see if it's working, and we can help you navigate some of those issues that may arise. But you should probably be able to do that fairly easily. Meet with your team prior to the Institute if possible. We know that everybody's busy, but I think we see more states that do those pre-meetings before coming to the Institute, just to get everybody, like we said, acclimated and on board with things. Identify your data to gather. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to gather that data. And I know I'll be sitting in a planning meeting and go, oh, I wish I had that data. But if you can identify based on your goals and what you think you're going to be talking about, some of those pieces of data that will help inform your discussion ahead of time, that will be really helpful, and get that pulled together. And then register for the CBVI. Make sure you share that link with everybody, and that you've got your team registered. So that's a key piece, but we're here to support you on that as well.
So just a couple more to-dos. So just a reminder to email the name and the address of your youth team member to Michael by April 15th, which is next Friday. You received an email earlier, or at the end of last week, around that gave you information about how to connect to the team leader webinar today. But it also had information in there about a door prize. So there is a Google Doc that you can sign up for. You can sign up on, saying you would be interested in sharing a door prize with from your state. And so we'll make sure that we have that link in our follow-up email for you. But that's just to kind of, historically we've done that before. People have brought door prizes to share, and we've drawn names and we've given out gifts. So the Vsphere Platform, there's some pieces to it where you can also get a prize or a gift. So if you're interested in confirming a prize, that would be great. And then you'll also, I mentioned it in the chat, but we'll be reaching out to you this week to confirm the people that we have registered for your team so far. And then also we'll be making those facilitator matches. If you chose to work with a facilitator in the next 2 weeks, you'll get an email about that as well. Jackie?
Oh, sorry. I was looking at chat. So I just wanted to share with you the resources. So if you do have questions, as some of you have prompted the conversations we've had, you've put some questions in chat. So go ahead and do that. We've got a couple of more minutes here. But we've got some resources we just wanted to point out to you. So we've got the strategic planning tool available. And then there's an online manual for that planning tool. You can find that at transitionta.org at the IntactC website. We'll make sure that that's available, or we'll send you the link to it if there's an easier way for you to access that too. The taxonomy for transition programming 2.0, that's just a helpful little piece that pulls out each one of those components a little bit more. You can find that on the website as well too. I found that's a really helpful tool, especially if you have new team members. Just share that with them so they can kind of get a feel for the conversation around those different components that are included in the Institute, as well as the planning tool if you're using that. And then a document that we released a couple months ago, I believe, is the side-by-side view on transition services guide. And that just really helps to line out a crosswalk those transition services across WIOA, across pre-employment transition services, IDE transition services, and WIOA transition services under rehabilitation. So just as a nice crosswalk, and again, that's probably really helpful for folks who maybe haven't been a part of your conversations as much, and to share with folks as a preparation tool, but also just maybe in your conversations to have that available too. So those we thought were 4 helpful resources for you. We wanted to point out. And Michael, I'm going to let you talk just a little bit more about registration and resources.
Sure. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully share my screen, and it is sharing. So what I did is I have taken you to our NTAC website. So that's what you should be seeing. And just as a reminder, if you're sharing this with other folks, just a reminder, they need to log into the site in order to log on to the Transition TA website. But when you go on, you'll notice that there is a spot on coming up. And if you click on that, that will take you to the page for the Capacity Building Virtual Institute. And when you look at that, there's some basic information about the Capacity Building Virtual Institute. And then if you go down, there's a box that says Learn More and Register. If you click on that, it takes us to our homepage, which is a really cool homepage, including the little countdown clock that those on the planning team were a little bit freaked out about this because it is only in 27 days, 21 hours and 2 minutes. It's fast approaching, but we are really excited about it. There's also a really nice section here that does a brief Q&A about the Capacity Building Virtual Institute, as well as the agenda that Jennifer went over today, where it gives you a brief outline of everything that's happening on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of the Institute. So you can find all of that information there. Again, you can link it directly from our website. A question did come in the chat too regarding if folks are interested in attending the Capacity Building Virtual Institute that are not on state teams. And this year, we recognize that, and oftentimes folks just want to come for the content sessions, and that's great. Please share our registration links, and folks can attend just the content sessions and then access the other resources we have this year using the Vsphere platform. So there's expo booths, there's the scavenger hunt contest that will be going on, as well as the lounges and discussion areas. So folks can actively participate, even if they are not part of your state team. So just kind of wanted to remind folks of that. The other thing quickly wanted to look at is the registration form itself. So when you click on, and you get to the site, you can register. And hang on 1 second, let me stop share and reshare. Just give me 1 minute to do that. And let me reshare that site. So just give me 1 second. On. Hopefully I can get that to share. And we're there. Okay, so this is the registration site itself. So when you go in, it's really just asking for some basic information, the participant's name, their email, the state that they're from, their role, if you previously attended or not, and then if they are part of the state team or not. And then there's a few additional questions there, and then it's saved, and that's how folks will register. So again, you can share this definitely with your state team members, but also if other folks are interested in attending the Capacity Building Virtual Institute, please feel free to share with that. And Jen, I'm gonna stop sharing if you want to pull the PowerPoint back up.
Yep, thank you.
And we wanted to also let folks know that, and a lot of you have already are participants in our peer network, our service delivery solutions peer network that meets every other month. This month, it's coming up this Thursday, April 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern. What the focus for this week's service delivery solutions peer network, it's going to be a follow-up to today's session. We will answer questions that you have. Jennifer and I know Jackie, as well as Ruth Allison and Brenda Simmons will be on there as facilitators for MenTech the Collaborative. But please feel free to join us. We also would like state teams to share with us their goals that they've worked on in the past, what they're planning for the future, and really any questions that you have about this year's Capacity Building Virtual Institute that you may think about after today's session. Please come and join us and have an open discussion. We haven't done this in the past, but we felt that this would be a good opportunity for folks to share what's coming up, what they've done in the past, and any questions they may have. So the link is there, the registration link. If you did not receive the email from me earlier this week, or if you have questions, please just drop me an email and plan on connecting on Thursday. And with that, thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
And so we just wanted to share with you too our email addresses. So feel free, if you have questions, to reach out to us, and we will be happy. If we don't know the answer, we will find the person that does and get it to you. So just wanted to let you know that you contact Bridget, myself, Michael, or Jennifer with any questions you may have if you can't come to Thursday's session, or if you in the future, as you're getting closer, please reach out to us as well too. And just wanted to also let you know that if you have a question specific to the online InTech transition planning tool, we'll hang out after this session and Jennifer can walk you through or answer any questions you have about it. So we can spend the next few minutes if you have time. If you don't have time right now to hang out with us, just connect with us, Jennifer in particular, about any questions, and we'll be happy to support you in that.
Thank you, everyone.
So with that, we'll end our session today, and hang out with us if you need, if you have any questions about that transition planning tool.
Let's see. Hi, you guys. Thank you so much for having this today, because I see that none of my ADE folks are on here from Arizona.